This podcast is a podcast that I have been asked by a few people if I would consider. It's quite a taboo subject that I understand a lot of people don't really want to talk about if they've experienced. However, I feel like I'm in a place in my life where I'm able to chat about various life experiences I've had, and I was contacted on Instagram by a few people who had heard me speaking on a TikTok live regarding miscarriage, obviously infant loss, and how that affected them in various ways. And it got me thinking that obviously that's something that I've experienced miscarriage. It's not a subject that's really spoke about. It was quite taboo. A lot of people, for obvious reasons, don't want to talk about it because they feel that obviously it's insensitive to bring up to someone. So I've decided to do a podcast without Paul, without Fraser, just me, just really to talk about my own experience, talk about, a couple of people who've contacted me regarding their experiences, who'll remain anonymous, and to talk about the what comes of miscarriage and how your thoughts, your feelings can be affected, and also how men can also be affected, because although predominantly it's a woman who goes through the physical aspect of miscarrying a child, men have also had a loss, and that's something that's often forgot about in society. So I'll start off my story. So I've had a miscarriage. I, at the time when having a miscarriage, didn't know that I was pregnant, which brought its own differences, because for me personally, I have never, how would I explain this? I have never had like a regular monthly cycle where I have been able to track, periods and stuff like that. So it's quite a difficult situation when you don't have that. So for me, I didn't expect that I was pregnant. I had been for previous testing, just because of my situation regarding monthly cycles and stuff like that, just to make sure there was nothing medically wrong, and there wasn't. So basically, I had fell pregnant, was unaware of it, had a massive bleed, which just wasn't normal for me at all, because as I said, I don't really get a monthly cycle. In the last, I would say, probably 6 years, I've probably had about, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 cycles of a period. But this was totally different. It was very different symptomatic wise. It was, increasing cramping. There was obviously, a lot of bleeding involved, and various things like that. And without going too much into it, if you have went through something similar, you understand that, there is a lot more there that does come away. So for me, it was a mix of emotion, because one, I didn't know at the time I was pregnant. 2, I then knew I was pregnant. I was losing that child, which, is really, really difficult to get your head around, because and one minute you're so happy, and then the reality hits that actually it's not a happy time because this is what's happening, and it's quite a sad time. So that is, you know, kind of my backstory of going through that, and you know, it actually is really draining. So physically it's quite draining, because, you know, unless your experience is, you know, a bit further on, and you maybe need some medical assistance, which can also be called a I think it's called a D&C, and you need to get that. Most people, you know, who miscarry tend not to go through that procedure, tend to just, you know, their GP and whatnot advise, like myself, just to kind of let nature run its course, which is what happened with myself. So emotionally, it was, as I said, extremely difficult, because having a child is something that I have always wanted, but due to just fertility struggles, which medically, you know, my GP doesn't know why, it's just not something that I'm able to, you know, easily continue a pregnancy. So basically, that's my story, and you know, it's took a long time for me to openly chat about something quite as sensitive, and taboo in the sense that not a lot of people want to chat about, you know, miscarriage, because it is really, really hurtful. As a female, you know, in society, it's expected that you'll get married, you'll have children, and you'll be the kind of housewife type role in the home. And that's always been kind of society's way of, you know, life. For some women, it just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. Some women, one, they don't want to get married, which is fine. Two, some women don't want to have children at all, again, which is absolutely fine. It's your own choice. And for some women who do want to have children, have struggles of having children, which people in society in general life don't understand, because, you know, I have been asked several times, whether it's been on TikTok or whether it's been in my personal life, when are you going to have kids? Do you want kids? You know, is there a reason you've not got kids and you're 32 years old? These questions, what I would say is, don't assume just because somebody doesn't have children, it's because they don't want them, or they've not tried to have children, because actually in asking these types of questions, it does spark, you know, kind of really mentally negative thoughts to someone who has had or experienced infant loss. For me, I felt pretty shit as a woman, that I wasn't able to continue a pregnancy. It makes you, for me, it made me feel quite, you know, like there was something wrong with me, that why could I not do this? There's women every day that fall pregnant. And so these are thoughts that come, I would probably say naturally, to most women who I've spoken to, and myself, who I've spoken to, obviously women on TikTok and who've Instagrammed me, and these are probably common, you know, thoughts that you do then have after infant loss. But what I'm going to say is, it's okay to have these thoughts. Again, society perceives that you shouldn't have any kind of negative thoughts or feelings, but if we were to live in that situation and live in that life of not having thoughts and feelings, you know, of you know, as a woman, feeling that you're not able to be a woman by having a child. It's probably one of the most highest thoughts up there, where you probably feel pretty shit about yourself. I have felt that myself. So I'm going to relate that to myself, in the sense that I have felt shit about myself in that way. But what I have to remember is, and I have a very different outlook in life probably than some people, but my outlook is, if it was meant to happen, then it would happen, and I would have had a baby. So for whatever reason it didn't happen. Maybe it just wasn't right timing. Maybe there was something else that I was meant to do in my life at this moment in time. I don't know why that happened, but that's the way I live my life, that I don't tend to focus too much on negative past experiences, because if I did, I probably, me personally, wouldn't get up in the morning and wouldn't move forward. That's not to say that there is women out here that also have that, because there's loads of women out there that have, these negative experiences and can't positively see another side that I can see. And I can empathise with that, because it's so difficult to pull yourself back out of that situation, back out of that negative mind frame, and back to a normality where you realise that you've had a baby, you've carried a baby, but you've not met your baby. You've lost them, and that's tough mentally. So, as I said, the world can be cruel at times, and it can be a place where women are perceived to be, I don't know, the stay-at-home wife or stay-at-home mother. But what about women who have had struggles? Or what about women who don't want children? Obviously I can't talk for women that don't want children, because I would love to have children, but I've had struggles. And so for me, the way that I personally move my life on is, I've obviously went for testing to make sure that, everything physically is okay with myself, and my health, which it is. But I just have issues with carrying a child. Which would lead me on to discussing how, as I've already kind of touched on, mentally it can wear at you. It can pull you right down. You can have your bad days, really dark days, because you feel so negative about yourself. You feel that you're not really, well, me personally, I felt that I wasn't a woman, because it's something that I should be able to do, no problem. And I've just not been able to. So yeah, I can understand that. Now, I've spoke to a few other women, and I have a few friends, who've also had struggles. I've had friends that have had struggles with miscarriage. I've had friends that have had struggles with ectopic pregnancies. And these friends, they've also been in these places where, they totally understand that as a focus, that is one of the main focuses that I've had in my life, and they've also had in their life. But they've had to not so much come to terms, that's a horrible saying, but they've had to accept that there is struggles there, for whatever reason. And that is a very difficult pill to swallow, so to speak. It's a very hard lesson in life to try and overcome. And for women who have had stillbirth, miscarriage, ectopic pregnancies, phantom pregnancies, they're all very, very real situations that women every day, for no fault of their own, find themselves in these situations, and they're absolutely crushed. So when someone comes up to you in the street or in a shop or your family and says, you're not thinking about having kids, wanting children, When do you think you'll settle down and have kids? These are really insensitive questions. So if anything, what I would like to think is that, one, someone can take away from the fact that there is support out there. It depends obviously on the level of support you need. Me personally, the support I've required is that I'm quite a strong person, in the sense that I don't tend to let things pull me down. After being in past relationships and things, I've learned how to cope and use different coping mechanisms. However, there's also support groups out there. There's a support group called SANS which help with child loss. There's various support groups out there, guys. And equally, there's also support in the sense that if you wanted to have additional support to fall pregnant, i.e. IVF, various scans, and there is also them out there as well. For me personally, I'm a firm believer in trying not to focus too much on my past, or I'll never move forward. For some people who especially have reached out to me, unfortunately focusing is something that they can only do at the moment, and it does really get to you. I can understand, because I've been there. When you have just lost or had a miscarriage, and you've just lost a child, and you're already feeling pretty shit about yourself because you're thinking, why did that happen to me? Why did that happen? And then your friends or your cousins or your family or your aunts or someone that you know falls pregnant, you do feel jealous a wee bit. I think most women, and probably men, who've been in that situation have experienced that, realise that actually I'm quite jealous of this family or friend or relative that is able to have a baby and have no issues with falling pregnant, carrying a child, and sometimes you almost have a resentment. I'm not saying that I've had that personally. I've not. I come from quite a large family. I'm lucky I come from a large family. I've got great support family-wise. But there is women out there that do hold a resentment because they see, friends, family, colleagues who then have pregnancies and they continue their pregnancy and have a beautiful baby at the end of it. And that's really difficult if you're in that mindset, in that mind frame, because emotionally and mentally that pulls you down. And the only bit of advice I would give is, if you're currently in that situation, please reach out, speak to someone. Doesn't need to be a family member, doesn't even need to be a friend. There's, as I said, there's loads of services out there that can offer support, and at the end of this link I'll try and put some of the services up, at the end of this video, to contact these services and get the support that you need. Equally, if you're watching this and you maybe feel that you want to reach out to myself, I don't know if anybody would, but on TikTok my name is Starkey Spence, on Instagram it's Starkey Spence, on all social media it's Starkey Spence. I would rather that you reached out and spoke than harboured these feelings and worries and just grief, because it is a grieving process you go through. It's a total grieving process. And again, some people don't understand that, because when you grieve someone, normally when you grieve someone, you've had someone in your life that you've lost. And when it's a pregnancy and you've never met that child, people don't understand it. How could you feel that loss, even though you do feel the loss? So that's also something that a lot of women and men have to overcome when dealing with a situation of infant loss. I've chose to tell my story because I just feel that it's important and I'm able to talk about my side of this story. There's loads of women, as I said, that can't talk about this, that don't want to talk about it, that feel the harbouring of resentment against other women, because they are pregnant and someone else is not able to continue a pregnancy for whatever reason the pregnancy's ended. And this is why I'm making this video, because if it raises awareness and it offers the ability to give support to other people out there to realise that you're not alone. Absolutely, you're not alone. You can do this. You'll have really dark days, but with the right support, you will then be able to see that there is a way forward in life. And so that's why I'm making this particular video, or podcast, I should say, podcast, because this is going to be on the podcast. And this is why I've made this video alone, because normally I'm on with Paul and I'm on with Fraser, and I think one of them can relate and one of them can't relate, and I think it would just be really difficult to have them both on here while I'm discussing such a sensitive subject. Which then would bring me on to men who are also in this situation. So there's loads of men who go through, their partners went through a loss and a miscarriage or a stillbirth or an ectopic pregnancy. And one, they're worried about their partner. Of course, they're worried about their partner. They're worried about being strong for their partner. They're worried about, making sure that their partner's okay and is comfortable and feels that they're supported. But that man has lost a child. That man is also grieving. And sometimes in society, they look at the woman and they are you okay? Are you okay to the female? But the male is shunned aside and is never, ever asked if he's okay. So, again, maybe this will bring awareness that if you ever have a friend or a family member or anyone who, one, has went through a miscarriage or a loss of a child, remember there's two parents there. There's two people that are affected, and sometimes maybe more, especially if it's a surrogate pregnancy, or if it's the grandparents and things. But generally, there is the two parents that are extremely affected by these situations. And don't forget about the man, because men hurt too. Men lose that child, or males I should say, lose that child. Equally, if it's a same-sex relationship, the other person in that same-sex relationship also loses that child. So be mindful that when you're asking a person or a family about children, just remember that it's not always because they don't want children. It's not always because they want to live a lavish lifestyle and spend all the money on themselves. It's not always because, they want to party all weekend. It's because they've had struggles, real struggles. And these struggles are hard. They're so hard. So offer your support. Be there for the person or the couple or, whoever it is that has been affected by miscarriage, infant loss. Because at the end of the day, if you don't offer that support, what happens is that person inhibits all these horrible negative feelings about themselves, particularly the woman if she's miscarried, about themselves and about the loss of their child, that once that runs too deep, it's so difficult to bring that person back round to a positive mindset at some point in their life. I'm not saying it's going to be right away. Obviously, it won't be right away. But just be there during the dark days. Just remember that in the darkest days, the stars will still shine and there will still be moments of happiness. As I said, I've talked about my experiences. Another experience that I will briefly touch on is not for myself, but I know that from other women who I've spoke to or who I'm friends with, or who I've became friends with, acquaintanced with, sometimes the loss of a baby just results in a total relationship breakdown, which is why I'm saying it is also important to remember the other person in that relationship, because if you don't and you both don't communicate, the relationship is just going to totally break down, which is not what anyone wants. If you're planning a child, or even if you've unplanned a child, 9 times out of 10, your relationship hopefully would be pretty strong. That it would be, the next stage in your relationship. However, once that stage, of being pregnant comes to an end, suddenly, that can totally break a relationship apart, because it's like two people tiptoeing around each other. They don't know what to say to each other. They don't know how to respond to the loss. They don't know how to communicate, and they don't know what to say that's going to affect the other person. And because of that, what happens is they just drift apart, and they still have the same feelings inside. They still have the same loss. They still have the same grief. They still have the same worries, but they've just never spoke about it because they've tried to remain strong for the other person, and in doing so, it then catapults a whole other series of issues, i.e. relationship breakdown, or even mental health breakdown. Men and women that have been in this experience or situation have then had a mental health breakdown. It's not uncommon. Some men and women just cannot get over the loss that they've maybe went through, especially when it's multiple losses. And so when it's that situation, what happens is they then mentally just break down because they cannot see and go further and understand why they have lost a beautiful baby, which then becomes an angel, and that can have a real negative effect on, as I said, mental health, which is why it's important to please, if you're in this situation or you know someone in this situation, make sure that you or that person talks. Make sure they've got a safe place that they feel supported. And if they can't and you don't want to speak to someone because it's your family and you don't want to burden them or feel that they don't understand, there's groups out there, as I've said, that they'll be in this video, that we'll link in, that you can contact. There'll be myself. You can always, I try to respond to all my PMs, or my DMs or whatever they're called. Please reach out and get support. As I said, this is a very sensitive subject to talk about, but I think it is very, very real to talk about, which is why I have opted to do this podcast and do it on my own, because I feel that it's not like in the previous podcast where we have a bit of a laugh. This is a very, very serious situation that needs awareness, and the more people that do talk and do raise awareness, the more people will then openly try and get support who are in, who currently are experiencing loss of a baby, because there is no worse a feeling than one, losing a child, and two, as a woman, feeling that you're not a real woman because you're not able to carry a baby. It is one of the shittest feelings, and you never forget how you feel in this. Like, I'm able to talk about this, but I know for me personally, it makes me feel shit. It makes me feel shit because that's something that I always wanted to have in my life, was children. I'm not saying that I can't have children. I'm 32. Who knows what might happen in my future? But going by my past and having miscarriage in my past, it makes it a bigger worry that when you then think, okay, maybe I will, continue to try for children, that there's always going to be that risk of having another loss. And it's about, again, how mentally strong you are of being able to cope and move forward. So please, if if you can take anything from this, is offer support. Reach out if you're in this situation and you need support. If you see someone in a family or a couple and don't have kids, don't automatically assume it's because they don't want them. It's because they maybe have had fertility issues for whatever reason. And just be so mindful of that, guys, because as I said, it's something that's not really spoke about, but it's widely out there that women miscarry every day, women lose children every day, men lose children every day, and they don't talk about it. They just they live their life in limbo, remembering. But please raise this awareness. I'm not going to go on too much further. I feel like I've covered all topics. I've covered how men feel, how relationships can break down, how it can affect your mental health, and mentally you can break down and have a mental breakdown. And especially, you can add the extra pressure as well of, focusing. And when you do that and you focus, we have to have a baby, that can mentally become draining, because you feel like you're trying for something that's never going to happen. So that can also be mentally draining, and again can also affect your mental health. So there's also that aspect of it, and also just the support. Please just support your family, your friends, anyone who's going through this situation or who has been through this situation. And also, as I said, just please do not judge someone based on their age and that they don't have children and think, well, they're a bit selfish, because there's other reasons that could be behind that. So I'm going to leave the podcast there. I've spoke for 30 minutes about this sensitive subject. I hope that this reaches someone who does need help. I hope that this reaches someone who can offer help. And I hope that if no one feels that they can get that from anybody else, that they contact me. Please contact me. As I said, I've told you my username on most social media is Starkey Spence. Reach out and speak, because you're not alone. You're not alone. And hopefully within speaking out, you will get the support to then cope with moving forward in your life. So I'm leaving it there for this podcast, but thank you for tuning in to this podcast special, and I will resume again with Fraser and Paul, hopefully on the next podcast. I know that this is obviously a very difficult one, but if you want to leave comments, by all means leave comments, and thank you for listening. Take care, guys.